Please welcome Dr. Levis.
Good morning, and we're going to see if I cut in and out as well, but we'll do our best. By the way, DTIC was a significant funder of some of the work that I did, so it was always interesting to try and figure out DTIC. And I have to say, you guys are playing to type beautifully. This is the only conference where we start at 8 o'clock, and we start at 8 o'clock. So thank you very much for having me. In the program, I told you that the title of this would be something like New Roles for Librarianship. And as always the case, life changes as you move closer to the date. So I want to talk about new narratives for librarians. And narratives are sort of interesting because it begins, one type of narrative is the stereotype, right? So when we talk about military librarians, my guess is people see people, walking the stacks with guns and parachuting out of planes with materials and things. And so, just a thought. And actually, this is a really interesting narrative. You'll see throughout here some different images from military history, many of which I'm sure you're familiar with. This was during World War I, and the American Library Association created their war effort, which was to provide people on the front lines with books and reading and materials. And so it's a really fabulous narrative, right? It's the idea that knowledge wins. It's all about knowledge. We got books, we got materials, we're selling it. This is a lovely narrative. It tells a story quickly and easily, people take it away. So I want to talk about the other side of that, which is that sometimes these narratives get in the way. That frankly, within the field of libraries and librarianship, we have several narratives that are in the way of progress, not only for us, but for those that we serve. And so I want to talk a little bit about narratives, setting them, etc. And I want to end with sort of a call for you to help develop a new narrative, particularly around the concepts of security, because I think you're in a unique position to do that. So I really ran across this concept of narrative, or the story of the community, in talking with a fabulous professor and advocate, Wendy Newman, who's at the University of Toronto. And we were talking about what happened in Ferguson. So many of you may remember that in Ferguson, Missouri, a white cop killed a black teenager, and the city exploded. The city exploded to the point where there were people showing up in militarized gear. There were people showing up in mine-resistant vehicles on the streets of Ferguson. I think my favorite comment of this was from The Daily Show, which is when they saw cops dressed in camouflage, they said, camouflage? If you want to be camouflaged in Ferguson, you should be dressed up as a Walmart, right? But this was the idea, and there was this narrative, and it broke all across the country. And we watched it night after night, and we saw it on the television, we heard it on the radio. The radio story once told of a parent sitting with their children late at night with a baseball bat sitting next to them just in case trouble was going to come to the door. All the time listening to exploding tear gas and rubber bullets outside. It's a narrative that's very frightening. It's a scary narrative. But what interesting thing happened in the midst of this narrative, which is that the Ferguson Public Library, and I know it's tiny, and frankly that's part of the point, put out this itty-bitty sign in front of it, and it says, "Stay strong, Ferguson, we are all family." And something interesting happened. That what happened with that public library and the St. Louis County Public Library that serves the same school district, which is when the explosion occurred, the governor of the state enforced a curfew, said, you can't leave. We're going to close down the schools, we're going to close down all municipal offices. So that parent sitting with the baseball bat, their children were in front of them because the children couldn't go to school, the children had no place to go, and the children were hungry. And they were hungry because at the beginning of the school year, they closed the schools, and a significant portion of that community is on free and reduced lunch, and if there's no school, there's no lunch. And so what happened is not only did they put out this sign, but then they invited the teachers to come in and create an ad hoc school in the library. When they ran out of room in the library, they worked in the museums and local churches, and they created a place where kids could go, and they brought in food to the library. This narrative of, look, we're not just black and white, we're not just cops and riots, there's something going on here, we are a family, it changed. Suddenly, instead of it just being, oh God, isn't that horrible happening over there, we said that could be Syracuse, New York. That could be Washington, D.C. That could be my town. That could be what's happening. They grabbed a narrative that said we are not simply conflict. We are not simply race riots. We are a family. We have children. They're hungry. We have children that they're going to learn. We have people who are scared. We are strong. And so Scott Bonner changed the narrative to the point where later national news would show up and tell the stories of what happened in Ferguson, and they would tell the stories of a community coming together. It's a powerful, powerful narrative. It is unfortunately a narrative that gets repeated. For those in the DC area, you're probably familiar that Baltimore had a kind of a bad day. Right? The idea that the largest peaceful protest in the history of the city occurred, but tempers boiled over, and looting and riots occurred, and in one part of Baltimore, they tore down a mall, they tore down a convenience store, they tore down everything they could. Now, once again, that's on the nightly news, a pretty simple narrative, and one that we are way too, unfortunately, familiar with. What we don't know about that narrative is when they torched and tore down the convenience store and the mall and shopping, they got rid of the only place that parents could get diapers. They got rid of the only public bathrooms in the area. They got rid of food in the area because part of the reasons for the riot was persistent poverty, and part of the persistent poverty was a lack of mobility and public transport for people to get out of that area to jobs and resources and materials, so they were stuck there. But once again, librarians chose to make a difference. This is Melanie Townsend Diggs. And the night of the riot, she said, I'm going to go down and I'm going to open our library. I'm going to open the door. And she called Carla Hayden, her director, and said, I'm going to open the door. Carla said, great, I'll be there. And they chose to open the door. They chose to begin providing legal aid services. They chose to give out diapers. They chose to make a difference, and they changed the narrative. Instead of it simply being violence, looting, race, it became community, need, persistent poverty, persistent racism, long-term discussion. They changed the narrative. So we want to talk about what are some of the large-scale narratives that are going on in librarianship, and why are they holding us back? John Palfrey, in his book Bibliotech, talks about nostalgia. And nostalgia, he says, is wonderful. We love nostalgia. It's warm. We sepia tone all our pictures. It's great. He said the problem is it also holds us back. Because nostalgia can be, oh, I know what a library is. I was in one when I was 10. How old are you now? 308? Right? I love to talk about how libraries can be loved to death. You guys must have had this experience where you go to a party, a reception, a cocktail party, whatever, and someone introduces you. What do you do? I'm a librarian. I always wanted to be a librarian. Really? Yes, I love reading. Really? Oh, the smell of a library. Really? You realize that smells mold, right? You did. It's right. It's the nostalgia that holds it back. I don't know if I have any folks from the DoD schools, or frankly, even if looking at kids in schools, but about the average age of people on boards in the United States is approaching 60 and above. That means that people on school boards and such, the last time they were in the library might have been 20 years ago. And so when they're adjusting budgets, when they're looking at priorities, when they're looking at, yes, you would like a 3D printer in your library, they flash back to when they were in a library 40 years ago, right? That's their image, which is, oh, you have encyclopedias. Thank you. Yes. By the way, if anyone is in the DoD schools and you have the World Book Encyclopedia, you will know what the next interesting story is. And I just like to pass these around. It turns out that the World Book has put all their letters on the spines. And so kids realize that they can move the letters to create messages. to the caring public, right? So, you know, maybe they get that from 40 years ago, but do you need to buy Expedia on a CD-ROM? It's like, really? No, it doesn't exist anymore in CD-ROM. Hello, right? So John says we need a new nostalgia. And I say we need a new narrative. So I want to talk about these narratives, and I want to talk about how these narratives are really, I think, holding back our profession. Library users consume. When we tell our story, when we communicate to our generals and the military and the families, when we talk out to the people who use us, our academics, etc., we tend to use, or at least not respond to, these narratives. Libraries users consume. Libraries define librarians. What's a librarian? Person who works in a library. Neutrality equals trust. People trust us because we're objective and we're neutral. And the other one is, that I want to talk about at the end, is security versus freedom, because this is where I'm going to ask for some help. But let's break these down. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a question. What do you call him? All right, what do you call people who come into your library? Patron. Customers? Patron? Researchers? Customers? Members? Students? All right. It's pretty good. This is mine. So what I would like to do, because it's 8 o'clock in the frickin' morning, is I'm going to make you do something. What I would like you to do is if you would please stand up if, don't worry, there's a criterion, if your library has users. If you think that, people are users that come into my library, you're willing to deal with that. All right. So far so good? See? Stretch. It's a good thing. All right. Please remain standing if you enjoy being used. Aren't you glad I didn't choose consumer?
Might have gotten a different response.
That's true. Thank you very much. I enjoy being consumed. The words we use matter, and they matter a lot. And so what I want us to think about for a moment is some of the terminology that we use around this and what it means. Now I want to be, before I get deep into this, I want to be very, 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 very clear on one point. What a community calls itself, in other words, if you have generals and soldiers and researchers and that's what people are used to and what they want to call, great. And frankly, every library can have a different term. What I want to talk about is what we use amongst ourselves, what we use within the profession, right? And I'll start with users. I don't like being used. But this user concept, old joke, I have to use it every time. It's like if you get a PhD in information science, you're forced to use this joke whenever you want. The two groups that have users are computer scientists and drug dealers, right? And so what it connotes, what it sort of implies is that people come in and they use us and then they leave. Because they use computer systems and they use this and you go, well, use is good. We want to use, we want usage. I think that's where I saw this going back and forth, which is if I'm not used, then I'm not going to be funded. So that use of the term, I understand it. But think about the relationship of a computer to a person who uses it. It's not a very reciprocal relationship. It doesn't involve a lot of partnership. And it goes right into the next one, which is consumer or customer. A customer is someone who comes in and expects a service, is paying for a service, is provided a service. It's a transaction. I come and consume something. I am a customer to this. But that kind of provider-consumer relationship is a very unnuanced one. And it's problematic because it kind of implies that what I'm a customer of or what I consume can be switched out. Right? Oh, I don't like this one. I use that. Someone said, I bought a Ford truck. I don't really feel like being a friend of Ford on social network. Right? So there's this relationship. It's kind of like in higher education when we talk about our students as customers. They're not customers. To begin with, customers are not always right. Right? If I go up and, Dave, you gave me a C on this. I would like an A. Well, you must be right. Right? It's a much more entrenched, entangled, complex relationship. For example, when you graduate a university and you go for the first job or the first position or the first deployment, etc., your reputation is dependent upon the institution that gave you that degree. So Syracuse University works very hard to have a good reputation so that when we graduate undergraduates, they get a job. They're dependent on our reputation. 10 years, 20 years out, we are dependent upon their reputation. Oh, look at who came through our service. Look at who we graduated. Look how important they are. Look at our alumni base. Right? That's not a customer relation. Oh, look who bought me. Right? It's much more integrated. I've read in doing my research on military libraries, and I was looking through the SLA blog, and you do lovely spotlights, and it's kind of like, what was one of the highlights? A lot of those highlights were, I worked with so-and-so to develop this. I worked with General so-and-so to develop this. I put in this new system with. That's a partnership. That's a codependent relationship. So if we use customer, and it drives me freaking nuts when a government agency, local, regional, state, federal, calls me a customer. Because one, it implies that I could go peruse other governments. I'm sorry, your customer service sucks. I'm Swedish today, right? The other thing is, we worked really, really hard, and people in the military worked really, really, really hard to become citizens and to defend what it means to be a citizen and to define citizenship and define the obligation of citizenship. When we talk about people as citizens, it has a completely different feel because we are not customers of the government. We are the government. In a representative democracy, I hate to get really heavy, but you guys are in the military libraries. You're used to people with things on their shoulders telling you these things. Right? Citizen means something. Citizen means an obligation. We are a people. Our government is us. If we don't like it, we don't choose and borrow and buy a new one. We vote, we observe, we protest, we whistleblow. We do all of these things to make sure that my government, myself, is governed well. So I don't like customer and consumer. Patron, I would rather be energized by our communities than patronized by them. Right? And I'm not a 17th century oil painter with a rich person who wants to hang things over a mantle, so patron, not so much. I like member. Why? Community member. And I'm going to use the term community a lot. And you're going to say, oh, public libraries, not me. If you're at a research university, you have a community of scholars, a community of students, a community of administration. The military is a community of soldiers, of support, of librarians. Community simply means that, one, people come around across a common variable, where I work, where I live, what I do. And they have to divide scarce resources. Money has to go here, money has to go there. Land, property, time, attention, respect, all have to be parceled out. That's why I use the word community. Doesn't mean public. It means a group of people making decisions, and people are members of a community. I like this last one, by the way. Ally. I learned this one in Pistoia, Italy, the San Giorgio Library. They have allies. In Dallas, they talked about having neighbors. Right? These terms mean something. When we constantly say, oh, how are your users today? Eventually, that means that we're tied into an entire rhetoric around the idea that they can be examined, they can be quantified, they can be designed for, and it creates this sort of abstraction as opposed to saying, how are your members today? How are the soldiers doing today? How are the kids? Right? We need to worry about this. We need to talk about switching the narrative from, instead of users seeking a passive refuge or set of materials, members engage with the library to learn and improve themselves. Because ultimately, that's what we're about. Whether you're in a DoD school, whether you're in a technology center, whether you're in a research library, wherever you are, why do we do what we do? It's not to inform people, because if we want to play language games, that could be the next game we play. What is information? Yeah, you're like, not after the last time you slapped me down. All right.
Data.
Data.
Knowledge.
Knowledge.
Facts.
Right? Think about it for a moment. If I asked you to write down a one-sentence definition of information, how hard would that be? You're probably going to be a piece of cake. But here's the trick. Data, ones and zeros. What's the difference between ones and zeros and information and knowledge? How people know and think. What's the difference from information? Because we like to think of books, materials, and reports as information, but I don't know if we would call it knowledge. Right? We're talking about people learning. We're talking about people doing better. No matter what we do as librarians, we are there to help people engage and learn. And by the way, physicists learn. People with PhDs learn. People with stars on their shoulders learn. They learn every day. And they don't just learn from reports and data and systems. They learn from novels and books and materials and fiction. We'll talk about that in a moment. So switch the narrative. We're not about consumers. People don't just come in and sit and consume. It's like an image, right? Here comes this great soldier, had a hard day, he sits down, just sort of opens his head and in dumps things, right? Yes, there's a place to be a refuge. Yes, there's a place to provide a safety. But it's also about us actively creating that area. Here's the next problem. The next narrative I think we need to change. That libraries define librarians. What does that mean? Well, just as the word information, by the way, information is, let's face it, it's sort of a societal conversational lubricant. Meaning that we don't quite have to define it, but it'll slap somewhere in there is the world. Right? So we use information all the time. Well, do you have the information? Yes, I do. Were you informed? Sure. Can you get me some information? Sure. Right? It's like statistics. I find people who ask for statistics tend not to care which ones you give them.
That's true.
Yeah, right? But is that, if you wake up in the morning and you hear that it's 3 degrees outside, is that good or bad? Is that information or not? Right? If you then walk out and find out it's 90 degrees outside, was the 3 degrees information?
No.
Is it still information?
Misinformation.
It's actually now information about the person who told you it was 3 degrees, which is never ask that person again. And for the scientists in the room, you've noticed that I haven't told you whether it's Fahrenheit or Celsius, but what if it were Kelvin?
Oh my.
Those of you who struggled through high school physics will explain that joke later. But, right? So information, what we want to do is we want people to change how they think, how they learn, how they interact with the world. And how do we do it? Well, our libraries do this, and our libraries do that. Could I get a show of hands of the number of libraries in the room? You lie, you lie, you lie, you lie. You're not. You have no mortar, you have no bricks. You do not have an HVAC system. You are not a library. You are a librarian. But you are forgiven for doing that because we do it all the frickin' time. Well, the library just did this. Really? Wasn't it you who spent 20 hours on this? Right? But you say, Dave, come on. Now you're being picky because we know damn well what a librarian is. We have a definition from the Oxford English Dictionary, which is a librarian is a person, good news, typically with a degree in library science, who administers or assists in a library. Now, why is this a problem? Well, one, I'm guessing that at least a percentage of you are librarians who don't actually work in a library. You work in a research team, you work embedded in different organizations, you work as consultants, right? We have some people from the vendors, we have librarians who work for companies and work for Google and work for all these things. They're still librarians even though they don't work in a library. What about the people who do work in a library? Is a janitor a librarian? They're in there. Is a clerk a librarian? Who's a librarian? And we all know, by the way, that if you have a button-down shirt and you walk into a library, you're a librarian because you're going to be the one they ask a question of, right? But it's okay. The real problem comes in that we don't have a good definition of a library. I know this type is that small. Trust me, I understand. A building or room containing the collections of books, periodicals, and sometimes films, and recorded music for people to read, borrow, or refer to. A collection of books and periodicals held in a library. Piece of cake. By the way, I don't see electronic databases up there. I don't see borrowing devices. I don't see the idea of having 3D printers in there. I don't see the idea of having story time in there. I don't see the idea of having lock-in PhD reference training systems in there. The problem with this definition is it's out of date. And we all know it, and we're like, oh, it's okay. It's kind of like pornography. I know a library when I see it. Right? And I've seen librarians that treat libraries like pornography because when you do ask them what they do, it's like, oh, you don't want to know. Right? It's like pornography. We show everyone the money shots up front and not what's happening behind the scenes, which is kind of tragic. All right. I've now lost my audience. I apologize. This is a problem because you guys know that that definition doesn't work, but you just let it slide. But the world, this is the Oxford English Dictionary. This is British people. This is smart British people, and they screwed it up. I mean, come on. By the way, they also have a grammatical problem. Who administers in a library? Does that mean you can administer anything so long as you're in a library? Anyway, but I digress. The problem that we see with this narrative is that if people define a library by a place with stuff, bad things happen. Bad things happen to you and then to the people you serve. Throughout the UK, people are closing public libraries. They're cutting funding. And they're saying, it's okay, we have a library. Why do we pay this librarian? We've got it. And they look at the room and they look at the stuff and they say, done. Because anyone can go in and manage the books. This is a problem. Because librarians are the ones who build libraries, maintain libraries, own libraries. You are the action. A library can shield you from the rain and exert gravity, or it's an abstract org chart. You're the one who makes it work. And so by constantly giving credit to everything we do to a building or an abstraction, we lessen what we do and our value and how we keep it. We need to stop doing that. For example, two different libraries. Right? By the way, no good, no bad, no right, no wrong. But look at what assumptions these libraries make. Number one, materials and stacks along the side, tons of meeting spaces, tons of open tables where people interact. Library number two, materials along the sides, throughout, and one-on-one carrels that in essence are there to keep these people from talking. Now, not right, not wrong, but a decision. All too often, we believe or attribute these decisions to an abstraction. But the spaces we build, the collections and how they're organized, all of this comes down to your professionalism. Look at the room that you're in. What can we decode from this room? Right? If you look at this room and you were to walk in and you're an alien species, you go, people are going to have lunch with an audience. Right? This is bizarre. And then dance, I suppose. I mean, we're at a wedding reception for voyeurs. This is what this room says to us. So we can't, it's not just a space. This stuff didn't just magically happen. Those books didn't magically have little white tags put on them. How we design it, how we lay out, what services we provide are choices of professionals. This happens online as well. This is two different websites. This is the Library of Congress website. This is the Chattanooga Public Library. Let's take a look for a moment. Now, I love the Chattanooga Public Library. They do lots of cool stuff, but what is their website about? Let's see. They have a title and a search of the catalog, a nice picture of an airplane, and then row upon row upon row upon row of books. Now, I want to be once again very clear. Dave does not hate books. This does, I know the director, fit their community. Their community starts with, I want books and materials, and they get them in, and that's when they screw them over and change their mind about the universe, right? Come in and check. We used to call this pizza book. You've done this. You know you've done this. You have a reception. You have a service. You provide food to scholars. Because, well, someone once said herding academics and herding cats. Herding cats is much easier. You open a can of food, the cats come. You open the academics, they're like, is this gluten-free? I mean, it's, you know. This was a choice. Now, Library of Congress, what are they doing? They're about the library. They have collection highlights. They have materials. They have all of this digital information up. They made different decisions. They're people decisions. They're decisions, hopefully, with our communities, hopefully talking to our members about what they want and how they can do it. Not simply, that's the design, they'll use it. Right? We see this. I ran across this article last night. Was anyone part of the CNO's reading list here? I love this article. Right? So, correct me if I get this wrong. Chief Naval Officer, did I do that right? Yes. Said, here are books that all folks should read. All Navy officers should read, and enlisted. Here are folks that people in the Navy should read. And you go, oh, that's really cool. And this is a picture of, let's see, the library of the Dwight D. Eisenhower carrier. And you go, oh, this is interesting, right? But let's talk about what happened. They said, here's a bunch of books to read. You should read this. It's about history. There's some fiction on there. It's cool. And there's 17 things on the list. Though as I read it, there are technically 15 things on the list and 2 that an admiral wanted included anyway, right? And so this is, and then you go, oh, that's cool. And they're going to provide them out to all these libraries. That's really cool. And then you go in and it says, well, last year we had 60 on the list and no one read them. And you go, oh, interesting. And then it goes, last year we used to break it out by rank. So ensign should read this one, officer should read this one, and we felt that was too discriminatory, and so we now just have one big list. And you go on further, and it's like, and we're going to ship all these out, and maybe if we can afford it, we're going to send it to recruiting centers, and et cetera. In essence, what this starts as is, library is book, we bought books, we're putting them in the library, that's good. And then they get down to all the stuff that they clearly ran headlong into a political maelstrom and don't want to announce, right? We put out a thing of 60, no one read it. Boom. Every librarian in the world goes, hello? We divided it by rank and people took offense. Boom. Every librarian goes, hello? Right? We're going to ship them out if we have enough money. Every librarian goes, hello? Right? This is what I love about this article, is that it really talks about you, but never mentions you. It's a desperate call for your participation, but they don't get it. How many times have you been at some sort of ceremony where an august official stands up and talks about how they love libraries? And it's like mandatory at ALA. Whoever stands up must first declare their allegiance to the book, and then they may discuss what they really want to talk about, right? And then they go into it. And so I was in the UK, and they got up and I love books, I love libraries. Now let me talk about civil rights in the UK. And a beautiful speech about civil rights and national ID and surveillance and this really nuanced talk. And at the end, a librarian said, how can libraries help? And the speaker, who just spent their entire time talking about access to information, protection of rights, and building knowledge about things, said, well, I have a pamphlet that you could include in the library, and there are some really good books on surveillance that you could have, and it's just, you just want to get up and say, you just said you need a place for people to meet and discuss. Hello? You just said that you need people to do research and help find this information and make it clear. You need trusted people in communities who can highlight issues. Everything you talked about needing, you have a ready army with 4,000 years of history in building knowledge, and they're ready to help, and you want to put a pamphlet in their office. Right? Why? Because we keep with this narrative. We keep using the library as a narrative. We keep putting out folders with pictures of books going, we keep pizza booking people. I know I didn't explain what that is. Pizza book, you lay out a spread, you lay out food, people come in, and you're like, hey, while you're here, why don't you read? Right? Pizza book. Right? So people came for the story hour, but they don't leave without a book. People came to research the new, particle detected in the Hadron Collider. They're not leaving without a book. It's like, really? We're more than that. So we need to, instead of defining a librarian by library, do it the other way around. A librarian has a mission. The mission is to improve society. Feel free to stop there. How? By facilitating knowledge creation in their communities. Now, knowledge creation sounds like a big fancy word. And it's a word that often people misread. They say, oh, maybe I work with scientists. Maybe I work with people doing oceanography. Maybe I work with researchers. They do knowledge creation. But really, my library just does knowledge dissemination, knowledge stacking, knowledge shelving, knowledge sorting. Knowledge creation is just a fancy way of saying learning. We facilitate learning. When someone comes in and they find the new drug, when they find the new drug to treat malaria, they're learning how to do it. They're discovering something. But frankly, if a 2-year-old walks in and learns that 1 + 1 = 2, they're creating knowledge. They're learning. You say, Dave, 1 + 1 = 2. They didn't create that. No. But they created it uniquely to them. Right? How many people have like the favorite book? Right? Don't worry, I won't slam you on this one. I promise. It's okay to have a favorite book. Have you ever reread that book like 10 years later? And the part that you loved and you held on to was like a 1.5 pages out of 500. And you're like, I thought that was the whole middle part of it. The reason is because when you're reading it, you pay attention and connect those ideas to your world. That view of it, even though the book is not unique to you, your view of it, your connection, how you understand it is unique to you. You create knowledge. So if this is what a librarian does, what is a library? A library there is a mandated and facilitated space supported by the community, stewarded by librarians, and dedicated to knowledge creation. Let me break that down. First of all, a library is mandated. You have to want a library. You can't just walk in and say, today, this is a library. Right? Someone has to declare that they actually care that you're there. But it's not simply an open, empty space, as we saw with the study carrels, as we saw with the reading, we talked about it. It's a facilitated space, virtual or real. How you lay out the furniture, how you lay out materials, how you design the website, how you organize the databases, how you do whatever it is, that's action. That takes constant reinvention. That takes a professional. It's supported and must be supported by the community through budget, through allocation of resources, through entrance into the org chart, through official recognition, through legislation. But it's stewarded by librarians. That doesn't mean manned by librarians, and it doesn't mean opened by librarians. It means that librarians take time to think about, with their professional input, what this space should do. And ultimately, dedicated to learning. All sorts, from the highest academic research to the most initial learning of basic literacy skills. That's what a librarian does, and this is the platform they use to do it. So we need to switch a narrative. Instead of the idea that libraries improve lives, librarians build platforms to facilitate improving society. A library doesn't do anything. Librarians do. We have to have individual agency. We have to show them that it is important that we are there. And this thing that we build, the space, the resources, the materials, they're just tools. A library is not a collection. A library is not a set of stuff. A library is not defined by the fact that there were a bunch of books sitting on the Eisenhower. It's defined by someone taking the time to figure out where it is, how it's organized, how it's going to be utilized, how it can be seen, what other services are available, by a librarian taking the time of doing something. Otherwise, it's a closet that they happen to stuff some materials in. So we need to switch narratives. You are important. You are vital. Everything else is just tools. The true collections that you have, the true collection of any library is the community that you serve. That's what you're doing. Collection development isn't picking the right books. It's helping the right person access the right books, or helping that person learn, or helping that person get a degree, or helping that person move forward, or helping that person learn to read, or whatever it is. That's your collection. And our collections, think about our collections. The richest, most brilliant collections in the world. Our collections include brave soldiers. Our collections include academics and scholars and historians and researchers. Our collection includes mothers. It includes children who are dreaming outside of the box. That's our collection. When someone says, what did you do with collection development this year, you should not be pointing to a budget and acquisitions and cataloging. You should be pointing to a soldier and a family and a parent and saying, I've made their life better. That's what I did today. I made their life better with them. They didn't use me. They didn't consume me. We worked together on it. Last narrative. Neutrality equals trust. So this is a lovely picture, and we love this picture, right, of a soldier reading on a deployment. My question is, what does that have to do with libraries? Well, that picture is the result of many choices of the professional work of librarians. To acquire it, to provide access to it, to organize it so someone could find it, to follow up afterwards. Whatever it is, that material is a product of you and your efforts. When we have a study, research, data, when we discover new medical knowledge, when we discover new technical capabilities, when we implement new systems, when we develop new policies, as a country and as a military, you are part of that. You helped the scholars, the academics, the policymakers, the soldiers make that happen. It is a human transaction, a human accomplishments with which we should assess our capabilities, not our materials and our things. We have values. One of the things that sets librarians apart from any other profession, well, not any, most other professions, is that we have a strong value system. We have an ethics. We state our ethics. We state our values. We believe in these things. We believe in service. We believe that the highest call is to help others. That if you want to assess my capabilities and my performance, you must assess those that I help. That's very different, right? It's not like a sculptor. It's either pretty or not. Sorry, I was an art major. I know that that was a slam, right? It's important aesthetically or not. It's in what other people do. And that makes assessment really tough. That's why we keep throwing numbers that mean nothing, right? Statistics, they don't care which ones we give them. So what do we give them? Circulation. Because checking out a book shows that we're of use. Really? You want your circulation numbers to go up? Check out a bunch of books yourself. Really? I don't understand why librarians don't cook the books. Honey, how was your day? Fine. Could you help me unload these 3,000 books I got in the back? Why? Well, I needed bigger numbers, right? Gate count. How many people came in? Do we really care how many people came in, or do we care that the right people came in? Do we care that the one person who came in last year happened to invent a new treatment for malaria for soldiers in tropical regions? That's an important person, right? That's an important endeavor. By the way, not any more important than a 7-year-old who came into a base library and discovered the love of literature. That's assessment, not 5. Data. So, service is one of our greatest values. Learning. Learning. Why are we here? To learn. Right? We talk about, in the military, I hear it, and once again, I apologize for my ignorance outside of the scheme, but I hear the idea of being a smarter army, being a smarter service, being agile, being able to change and move. That means you're a learning organization, and the heart of librarianship is learning. We learn from fiction, we learn from nonfiction, we learn from experimentation, we learn from databases, we learn from each other. If your true collection is everyone that you serve, how much time do you spend connecting them? When they walk in and say, I'm studying X, Y, or Z, did you go, did you know that over here they're studying the same thing? Can we connect you together? Learning. Intellectual freedom and safety. A library should be a safe environment to explore dangerous ideas. It should be a place where people come in and they don't think you're looking over their shoulder. You don't think they're being tracked. You know that they have privacy, that they can come and truly explore where their mind goes without being watched. Intellectual safety and physical safety. And this last one, intellectual honesty. That is very different than unbiased. Librarians are not objective. Librarians are not unbiased. Librarians have a point of view. If you believe that the best learning comes from the richest information sources, that's a bias. If you believe that you should be a safe place to explore dangerous ideas, that's a bias. If you believe that connecting people together is more important than connecting to materials, that is a bias. It's a perspective. It's one that we have learned over thousands and thousands of years. So we are not unbiased. We can't be. We're human. But we can be intellectually honest. I don't agree with this, but I think you should know about it. I have this point of view, but here's what's available as well. That's not being unbiased. Because if you're unbiased and someone goes, I would like information on climate change. Well, here are people who agree and here are people who disagree. Is that being unbiased? Is that being useful? As opposed to, here's where 99.9% of the scientific community has consensus, and here's the wacky senator who I have no idea what was smoking last night. Right? By presenting both of those, and equally we're not being unbiased. By the way, doing the scientific consensus versus a non-scientific. We're not being unbiased, but we have to choose between those. And simply saying we collect it and pointing to our books and materials as a way of taking out our personal responsibility means you take yourself out of the equation. People are important because they make a difference, not because they don't make a difference. We have points of view. We are intellectually honest. This is a study done of school libraries, including DoD schools. And what it shows over and over and over and over and over and over and over is that a school library with a certified school librarian improves test scores, improves academic performance. It's not the presence of a library, it's not the presence of materials, it's not the number of hours a day, it's the presence of a certified school librarian. They make a difference. They integrate, they work in curriculum, they make a change. Do you have these kind of numbers to talk about? We do better research, we have greater scholarship, we do more scientific discovery, we have better satisfied soldiers. Do you have those kind of data? Because you are not neutral, you are not unbiased. To be neutral comes from the same root as neuter. I am a neutered librarian is not the next poster for us to put out. I make a difference. I went to school for this. I understand this in a way that is different than you understand this. I have values and ethics. I am important because I have a point of view, because I am trained, because I understand what my community needs. I'm not unbiased. I'm trusted. You trust people not because they are objective. You trust them because they're consistent. Right? I had a colleague in the PhD program, Mary McKenna. I love Mary. And every weekend I would say, Mary, what movie should I see? Because I knew whatever movie she would give me, I would hate. Likewise, we could do it exactly the opposite. I mean, it was like feelings and gunshots. It's really, right? She was a credible source for me because I knew consistently the data I would get, and it was worth me seeking it out because I could make that decision. That's very different than going up and going, Mary, what movie should I see? I'm sorry, I can't take a stand on your movie choices. Right? If you get that, I'm sorry, I don't have a perspective. I'm sorry, I can't provide. If you keep telling people you're sorry that you can't have a professional view and understanding, people will eventually say, why am I bothering having this conversation? If you send someone to a book or a digital resource, you've made a decision. If you send something with citations or not citations, you've made a decision. If you buy one book over another book, you've made a decision. Own it. You're intellectually honest. You're not unbiased. You're not neutral. You're an ethical professional that makes decisions and choices and have value. Switch the narrative. Instead of librarians are objective and neutral, librarians are trusted partners in knowledge creation or learning or society, whatever phrase you want to use. We earn that trust. We've earned that trust again and again and again. We've earned that trust when we do things that shouldn't earn us trust. You go, if I have a point of view, I can't. I'm a government employee. I'm not allowed to have an opinion. Really? I can't have an opinion. What is your value? Did they hire you literally to sit in a seat? If so, chimpanzees are cheaper. Well, actually, no, we're not allowed to do that anymore, right? But the idea is, they're a professional that's part of this, right? I'm a trusted partner. I've earned trust. I have a voice. People respect what I say. So if we add up these narratives, what we want is instead of customers and libraries and neutrality, which means passive people accessing passive services, our libraries are here just in case. Our libraries are waiting for you to come and discover them. Our libraries are here if you get stuck. Our libraries are here because we have good, pleasant reading when you're in a dangerous environment. It's not that that's unimportant, it's just that that's not passive. If you are sending novels and fiction to the battlefronts, you have made a choice. That is a belief that is new. By the way, fabulous book. Wayne Wiggin did a great book on public libraries. And in it, he talks about the history of the public library in America. And in it, he talks about the novel, the literary novel. In the 1800s and towards the 1900s, public libraries didn't have fiction. We didn't put novels in them. And you go, oh, sure, we just did nonfiction. No, it wasn't simply we wanted to put our money and resources. Society looked at the literary novel and found it dangerous. Bringing pornography back into it, it's pretty close to how they viewed the literary novel. If you look at newspaper article after newspaper article, including novels in a library collection, there are things like, only denizens of the night read novels. And young girls and farm boys should not read novels because girls will get a sense of above their station and boys will want to become cowboys instead of working on the farm where they should stay. Now we look at that and we go, right? But why did it change? Why did it change from the 1880s when we said the literary novel is an evil and distraction to a picture in World War I of the road to knowledge, where we send books out to the front, where they're going to win the war? It changed because librarians and the communities they work with got together and made the change. When they said, no, we're putting them in, we're including that information, that was an act that it wasn't passive. Change from this passive to members and librarians and intellectual honesty, learners improving with partners. What does our library do? We help our community get better. How? We actively partner with our soldiers, with our families, with our researchers, with our scholars, with our administration, with our staff, with everyone to make this a better world. It's a much more powerful narrative. And now I come to you with a request. Because I think we need a new narrative, not about libraries, that was that narrative, but about society in general. And it's a new narrative that for me started here. Right? And it didn't start recently, it started a little over a year ago with the Charlie Hebdo shootings. When the Charlie Hebdo shootings happened, radicals going into a radical publisher of satirical comics and killed illustrators and writers, someone asked, what should libraries do? Is there any role for public libraries in here? And I said, yes. I said, what we need to do is we need to talk about knowing our community, and a strong community are people who know each other, etc. And it's a message that has become much more current because of the recent terrorist attacks in Paris. And of course, now in California. And it's a narrative that we see over and over and over again. And it's a narrative that goes like this. If you want to be safe, if you want to be secure, if we're going to protect you as citizens of this country, we need you to surrender some of your liberties. We need you to be willing to be watched. We need to collect data. We need to collect records. We need to limit assembly. We need to limit due process. We need to suspend things. After 9/11, the Patriot Act was only one small version of that in the United States, and in France, they've just passed emergency powers for 3 months that give the government not only the ability to suspend it for terrorism cases, but also drug cases, and just about anything they want. We need this. Your government needs this so that we can keep you safe. Surrender to us liberties so that we can provide safety. Rather than simply fight this current false dichotomy of security versus freedom, because that's what it is, librarians should craft an alternative narrative around security through knowledge. right? Security comes not through limiting freedom, but in stronger, inclusive communities where neighbors know and respect each other. When the towers came down in New York City, when a plane crashed into the Pentagon right across the street, I was running a service called Ask Eric. It was a question and answer service on the internet for librarians and policymakers. Our number one question the day after 9/11, on the 12th. Anyone?
Where's Afghanistan?
No, but that'd be a good one, right? It wasn't about firefighters. It wasn't about what is Islam? What is a Muslim? Because at these days, we know those terms. We're busy butchering those terms. We're busy creating a two-dimensional narrative around those terms. But back in 2001, what's a Muslim? We can provide these kinds of information. We can provide this kind of insight. Now, I'll be honest. When I was going to include this, I was a little worried. Talking to military librarians, this gets really close to ideology. This sounds really close to activism. But then I realized that the military's kind of had this message for a long time. This is the 1930s trying to get war bonds. Bonds to support our military so that we can defend freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom of want, freedom of fear. World War II recruiting posters. Americans will always fight for liberty. We have soldiers out there so we don't have to fight them here. We are out there preserving the American way. A good soldier is someone who's preserving the Constitution. This is a narrative that rings loud and clear throughout the military history. We need to talk about how we can craft this narrative. If you are passive, if you are there waiting for people to come in and you are a collection of materials and it's all neutral and objective, then you're not in the narrative business. Someone once said, it's the idea of if you're not invited as a stakeholder to the table, you're probably what they're serving on top of the table. If we sit back and say, we are objective, we are not unbiased, we are here just in case people know it, then we're not part of a conversation. We don't develop narratives, and people will develop narratives around us, narratives that we feed through we're neutral. We're collection, we're materials, we're objective. If, on the other hand, we say we are trusted partners, we are active, we are professionals, we have points of view, we want to make and be part of improving this military, this service, this country, this world, this society, then it is incumbent upon us to help shape the narrative. I want to be very clear. I'm not asking you to shape a gun-controlled narrative, and I'm not asking you to shape a Democratic or a Republican or a Liberal. I'm not asking that. I'm asking that every day you have people that you serve that have thought about, made dedication to, made pledges to defend a scheme, an understanding, a social contract about this country. Every day you have people coming in that are either supporting, in midst of, dealing with the effects of, living with the realities of a fight for our freedoms. Every day. Every day they come to you. If not you in person, they come to your facilities, they come to your services, they come to what you provide. Every day they come to you and say, how can we accomplish this mission? And right now, throughout this country, everyone is asking the same question. I'm afraid. I'm scared. I'm traumatized. I'm angry. I don't trust them. That's happening right now throughout this nation, throughout this world. And those questions you have been part of answering. Whether you're answering them through doing experimentation, medical experimentation on head trauma. Whether you were involved in educating and teaching children. Whether you're working with families of multiple deployments. Whether you're working with soldiers developing and crafting policy or weaponry or what have you. You have been facing this issue. And I'm going to argue, not neutrally and not passively, you have been an important part of shaping that narrative. For over the history of this country, libraries have been part of this narrative. What are you going to do now? What's the narrative now? If you stand up and say, we stand ready to change the world, no one has ever changed the world by standing ready. We are part of it. We are active. We build communities. We build soldiers. We build science. We build technology. We defend liberties and freedom. Help us craft that narrative. How can a public library in Seattle or Spokane? How can a school library in New York or New Canaan? How can an academic library in Oklahoma or Texas help this world? How can we as librarians, no matter where we work, make sense of a world of fear? How can we transform fear into knowledge and knowing? Because what will defend us is not recording people's phone calls or gathering their metadata or taking away anything. What will defend and create strength and security is getting rid of the unknown. To dispel the darkness of ignorance is to preserve freedom. When people get up and say things like, we are going to create a database of Muslims so we can follow them around, they have forgotten our history. They have forgotten what we've learned. When people get up and say all Muslims are bad, people don't know what they're talking about. That is not a question of policy. That is not a question of ideology. That is a question of ignorance. And that is our job. When people talk about how we are going to put lives on the line, lives that all of you work with on a daily basis, we want that to be from the most informed, understanding, and powerful positions possible. We cannot let that passively happen. We must be part of that dialogue. We must be part of that discussion. What we do, from the smallest acts of kindness to the largest acts of enlightenment, are part of a librarian's mission to make the world a better place. That doesn't happen in shelves of books. That doesn't happen in rooms. That happens in person and connections and relationships. And that's what we are about. That's our new role, and that's our new narrative. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. I have time for questions, comments, things thrown at me.
Arguments.
Arguments, absolutely arguments. I love arguments. Please.
Just a comment. I am so sick of having to explain what I do. I'm like, I spent 2 years getting my master's. You don't need to know what I do. You just need to know that I do it well. And I have this micromanaging whatever, and they are of that old narrative where people think I just check out books.
Yep.
Nobody does that. I mean, I am so much. I mean, I'm a one-person show,
Yep.
right? So I inherited a library that was not cataloged. Okay, I thought, oh, easy peasy, I can do that in a year. I've yet to get to it. Okay, because I have to do my job, which is helping researchers not duplicate experiments, helping researchers find all the information they need. And it's frustrating we do need a new narrative, because the old narrative is so outdated and outmoded. It's not even, I mean, and everybody in positions of authority seem to use it.
Right. And what's interesting, I don't ever get that one. Sick and tired of explaining that librarians are actually professionals.
Yes.
Right?
Oh my God.
And dealing with the old narrative. So
Yeah.
what the question is, what can we do? I'm going to add the question if I
Yes.
will. One, amen.
To change
Two,
that.
one, we need to watch our own messaging and narratives. Go back, look at your websites, look at your newsletter, look at your annual reports, look at the data you're providing. And everywhere you see the word library in it, ask if you can substitute your name, your position, something to the effect, right? We need people to begin to identify us not as simply that thing over there. Two, there are increasingly numbers of materials from, I mentioned John Palfrey's bibliotech to, I wrote one called Expect More, where we're trying to create materials that we can give them. Now that assumes that they're going to read them and take them, but once again, if the Chief Naval Officer is creating reading lists, we can as well. The other part of it that I think is very important is the concept of a coalition of the willing. Finding people whose lives that you've changed and helped and who get it will always be much better advocates than we are for ourselves. So finding someone to go to your micromanaging supervisor and go, let me just tell you what happened yesterday with, and this was really great and I did this, right? This is something, I know that many of you are work in sort of academic settings, right? Have you ever gotten the third author? Now, it may sound really weird to be the third author, but if you look in the hard sciences where they have text with literally 3,000, I'm not making this up, 3,000 different authors on it, maybe we could fit somewhere in there. But that idea of building a coalition of the willing, finding the people that we're serving and asking them, right? Because as a service people, this is something we tend not to do. Ask other people to do something for us because it's our job to help them.
It's really hard for us.
I know. Ask them. But here's the thing. Favorite phrase, right? How can I help you? We're librarians. That's a wonderful phrase. Have you ever thought for a moment how arrogant that phrase could be? No. Arrogant? How can I help you? How can I, with access to the resources, degrees, and the amazing ability of librarianship, help you? Who clearly are in need. Right? I mean, think about the whole idea of a reference desk. What do we do at a reference desk? We ask someone to come up and publicly admit that they're ignorant. And we wonder why they don't come. Right? What if instead of saying, how may I help you, if they came up to you and go, what are you passionate about? What are you learning today? Can I be part of what you're doing? Thanks for inviting me in. Now, I understand. There are going to be places where how can I help you? We're going to use that. But this notion of what are you passionate about today? What are you learning today? That micromanaging whatever has a passion. It may be micromanagement, but they have a passion. Right? Figuring out how you can feed that passion through reading, through literature, through databases, through 3D printers, through connecting, to building consortia, to building groups of fellow interested folks. That's what librarians can do. Librarians in research settings are one of the few individuals that can cross stovepipes. The fact that you're here from all the different services, the fact that you represent different libraries should give you a power beyond simply coming in every so often looking at vendors. That checklist that was mentioned before, love it, needs to include the idea of connecting people. And I'm guessing that connecting people in a military environment is very different than connecting them in a medical environment. They're all challenging. But that notion of getting new librarians up to speed with military etiquette and protocol and such should be arming them to connect people. And then what happens is you get that message back. Right? Part of one of the things I want you to think about for this annual meeting, do you guys develop at the end of every meeting an action plan? I heard these issues. I heard the issues of selling and we're beyond the books, or issues of we need greater budget, or we need whatever. Imagine if at the end of the conference you spent some time, said, this is the 3 things we want to work on as an association, as a group. And the very first day of the next conference, you stand up and say, or you say, these were the 3 things that we said we were going to work on. Here's our progress reports. And it's doing things, not writing things and not a lovely IFLA statement that says libraries are good. Stop it. The greatest selling point to keep libraries going is not libraries are good. It's libraries change lives. Libraries improve, librarians change lives. Librarians improve society. Librarians make things happen. And we do it by doing these things. That checklist needs to not only be about what librarians need to know, but it needs to be what the people they're working with need to know. You've just hired me as your librarian. Here's your checklist. Did you know that you could expect a hell of a lot more than me than checking things out? Did you know that you could expect... Do you guys have case studies? I've seen the blog where you talk about individual people. Have you turned them into case studies so that next time you want to start a new initiative, you can bring out the case study and say, we can do things like this, we can do things like this, we can do things like this. Active, progressive. That's what librarianship is. If you spend any of your time coming up with one more categorized list of links on the internet, stop it. Stop it. Google has made those irrelevant. You can just search on them. Go and do things, build things, showcase things. Next time at this conference, at that reception, I know you want to bring people in. figure out some way to force them to come in so that that reception dinner isn't just librarians, but librarians sitting with generals and colonels and administrators and staff. Start with the folks you know. Arm them. Give them what they need to tell your story. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant. Yes?
One of the things that I think would be helpful would be to gather. I know a lot of you work with researchers who create projects, people who write books. I actually have been acknowledged in the foreword of a book when I helped a researcher where I was working. How many of you have ever gotten an acknowledgement like that? Okay, we need to gather your stories because you're making a difference, and it's the sort of thing that our organizations can understand. If you've been thanked in front of your bosses, some of our faculty members invited us to a faculty meeting and gave us certificates because we helped them create a new course. That was valuable because all the faculty members in that room knew that they thought we had made their work easier and helped them create a better course because we worked with them, which is exactly what you're saying. Those are the kinds of things I think you're talking
Absolutely.
about that we could do to make that value that we provide better understood. You know, think about your organizations. Come to us and say, you know, this is where I provide the value in my organization, whether they recognize it or not yet. And maybe we can get that narrative built that he's talking about.
Build a friends group. The idea, you know, to have those people, thank you for the certificate, would you mind being on the Military Librarians Friends group where we were talking about?
I agree with Lois, but I think you need to go to the local level. So if we don't do it enough in-house, we don't sit there and say, so we're doing the metrics, we're doing the usage. And yes, sometimes they're important, sometimes it's not.
Right.
But the big things I always keep is kudos. So we get a kudo. So I'm telling a story. Let's get away from just quantitative, qualitative. I'm going to tell a story. So I'm going to say, we provide this service. And why is this service important? Here's a couple of vignettes from some of our users saying, you really supported our military efforts, or you really supported this. And that is the thing we got to get better at. So it's great to go out and help our community, but we also have to help ourselves in those internal organizations that we're in to show the value, to come back and say, we're really here to support the organization, not to beat the library.
Absolutely, absolutely. And knowing that, frankly, we've always thought to be of service means only to others. We must be service to ourselves as well. And so to take the time and the effort and to show that it's important at a local level to collect that. To look at, I know we don't like the word marketing because it's either too commercial or whatever, messaging or the narrative. Kim Silk, a data librarian, once said, you need data to make stories real, but you need stories to make data matter. You need them both together. And so it really is the idea of creating a proactive system. I love the library literature. Writing articles about, you know, librarians, 2 librarians, 4 librarians is great, but you might want to think about how do we get into the newsletter at a local level? How do we get into these discussions? How do we look at information centers? How do we build those kinds of things?
We already know what we do.
Yeah.
We need to tell somebody else who might be able to help us out what we do.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you, one of the common reactions I get out of the talk was, oh, Dave, it's so nice to hear a positive message of libraries. I think it's great. But if you're not hearing a positive message of libraries when you get amongst other librarians, you need to start there. Which is, I'm tired of hearing we can't. I'm tired of us talking about ourselves. Let's get out and develop an action plan to actually make this happen. And it's going to be local by local, but how can we support it at a larger level? Other questions or arguments? Please.
What do we do when our vocabulary is being stolen by other entities? You know, you get on SharePoint now and it's the library. You get on Blackboard and it's the library. And they're talking about a collection of documents, not, so are we beyond the word library and librarian, and do we need to come up with something else because our words have already been co-opted?
2 thoughts. First, there have always been libraries that have nothing to do with librarians, right? And programmers work with programming libraries and such. So preserving the uniqueness of the word will not preserve the value of the profession, right? Short answer. The longer answer is we're entering into a very interesting phase. Been so for the past 20 years. It used to be that libraries had a monopoly on information provision. Right? You had to go to the library because we had all the DTIC reports, we had all the materials because we centralized them, etc. Now we are in a world with SharePoint servers and the internet, etc. But what's interesting is, I think all too often we think of that as a zero-sum game, which is as more people enter into the world of vocabulary of libraries, we're getting marginalized. Think of it instead that what's happened is this. Every industry is now an information industry. You know, the military is an information industry. The divisions are an information industry. And so we actually are in part of a much larger dialogue. And so part of it is, how do we make sure that we engage in that larger dialogue? So if I run across the library on SharePoint and I realize it's a mess because it's an alphabetical listing of, you know, out-of-date materials, it's not how dare you call it a library, it's let me see who did that, knock on a door and say, did you know? If we just did this, it would not be useless. Probably don't use the word useless, but anyway. Back to that proactive nature, which is if you're going to call yourself a library, let's visit. Let's have a discussion, not to bring it up to my standards, but to see how I can help. Because, you know, I come from an information school. And one of the things is, oh, all our schools have dropped the library from their name. They clearly betrayed the profession. Dun, dun, dun. But what we've done is we've been able to engage a wider spectrum of people, and what we need to ensure is that our values and our ethics go with that broadly. In other words, I'm not worried that people in the banking industry have either take on the word library information. I'm worried that they are not ethical in their treatment of people and use of money. I want more librarians working within there, whether they're in a library or not. So that's the sort of larger context. So I think one, treat it not as a threat, but as an opportunity. Two, if it is a threat, you're not going to fight that battle. You need people as colleagues to go fight that battle for you. And three, you know, it really is this notion of library is a valuable name. When you look at the most trusted professions, librarians right up there. It's time for us to start cashing that check, right? Even those people who say, oh, libraries are useless, it's almost always after the first sentence is, oh, library. Right? Back to my beginning talk. Oh, I love libraries. You ever use one? No, they're useless. Right? They're out of date. And it's always, you know, rich white guys who don't have to go to them that made them out of date. Right? Oh, we got Google, we have this. And you're like, no, you don't have Google if you're working in a military setting that has no open access to the internet. No, you can't use Facebook as a way of sharing and building community when you're in a high security environment. Right? No, I'm sorry, you can't tweet on the front lines at any time. Right? We serve a different world. Libraries are important because we've evolved and we've changed, and you trust us. And you trust us not because we're neutral and not because we're quaint. You trust us because we have points of view and we make lives better, faster, easier, etc. So back to the narrative. Narrative has to be followed by action, but narrative is an important part. So I'd love to be able to say, here's the magic solution. But, yeah.
I wanted to hear your point of view.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments, thoughts?
And following up on that, people build libraries on SharePoint and all of that. They don't build librarians.
Right. Actually, I'll take that two different ways. One, they don't understand that you need one, right?
Right.
And the second is, we've done a lot of speaking about investment in libraries. Once again, I'm just talking about the literature I ran across. You know, when Rand or whatever does a study. And by the way, remember when the Rand and the MITRE Corporation, big military stores, were libraries? That was in essence what they were. Larger concept. Anyway, how much are they investing in you? Right? When you talk about the budget, how much it is, oh, we need more stuff, and how much is, you know, I'll take less stuff and a conference attendance. I'll take less stuff and an online webinar. I'll take time so that I can attend and be part of these things. I know you're part of, I think, the FLIC, and different webinars and training materials, do you have the time to inform each other? Right? When you're busy checking things in and out, do you ask for the time to put together those showcases, to put together those exemplars and such? Another thing that this organization could potentially help move along. So the question is, in your narrative, when you become important, right? The soldier is the most important thing, not the gun that they carry. The librarian is the most important thing, not the tools that they shelve. Right? Is that part of the narrative? What's the training look like? How do we send them in? If you don't have a library science degree, I'm not advocating everyone needs one, but you probably need some education in the basics of library science and ethics and materials and values of information organization and outreach. Are you providing this? Do you guys run it to IMLS to create joint programs across governmental organizations to prepare military librarians to better serve the defense of our nation? Good Lord, I can write that grant right now. Right? Are we writing those? Are we building those things in? Are we active researchers on it? Other actions that we could put, that could be a bullet point. We want to go create a training plan. All right, next year. We wanted to, did we? What did it look like? Please.
Couple of comments. The CNO's reading list that you mentioned was almost certainly not drafted by the CNO himself. He probably had, if he was smart, the librarians working on it for him. If the librarians were smart, they would have seen it coming and offered to help. The second half of that comment is that the librarians who received certificates of appreciation for helping with course development, instead of having those on the wall in their office or their cubicle, should have them framed at the front desk.
I love that. Absolutely. The CNO, from the article, the CNO's list, there was a group of officers, in essence, providing input and open input. You said you had something to do with the CNO?
Years ago.
Years ago, okay.
Not currently, but at the library where I was at OMI, we went and did a look at that list and everything was digital books.
Exactly. What a great initiative. Maybe we could make it a little better. I mean, what I understand that point, which once again, amen, is proactive, be out there, be forward, and once again, sound your trumpet a little bit. This notion of saying that you have value, you need to demonstrate that as well. I think too often librarians take the sort of duck model, looking calm and serene on top of the water, paddling like hell underneath. Sometimes it's okay to show the splashes, to show the effort, to show what's going on. And the other thing, back to local knowledge. I was at the Department of Justice, and I heard a great story about a senior lawyer going to their legal librarian and saying, I'm due in court in like 4 hours. I have to dispute this expert witness testimony. I've been all night. I can't find information. Can you help me? And 15 minutes later, off LexisNexis, they're printing out materials, right? Now, that's an interesting story, and it could be a yay, librarian saved the day story. But what got much more interesting was the librarian went, bing! Expert witness testimony is the thing that most of our lawyers have to encounter here at the Department of Justice. I'm going to offer a course in researching expert witnesses, but this was where it got really brilliant. She didn't call it research on expert, she called it character assassination 101. Because she knew the culture with which she was going to interact with. And she got up and she would say, you can use LexisNexis to search on these kinds of terms, or I could do it. You can use the open internet, or I could do it. In other words, the idea of being proactive and working within the culture, looking for those opportunities, right? So clearly, as I said, that story on the list, there's some banging of heads. It would be, at this point, advantageous for someone to go, I saw this great list. We're looking so forward to putting these materials in our different branches on our military vessels and such. You know what else we could do? We could work on digital versions of them that are available, and we can help make those information available. So it's an opportunity to do outreach. I'm telling you things you know. I understand that. What I'm really, if you take nothing else out of this discussion, muscular librarianship You know, in-your-face librarianship is what we need to think about. We have a stereotype of being meek and passive, and it's time for them to realize that's simply guerrilla warfare where we are getting their guard down. Now we're really going to go forward and take over the world. I mean, you know, it's all about world domination through librarianship. This is what we are a part of. And we want to recruit every person, whether they walk in or don't walk in, to be part of it. We want everyone who retires from the Navy or Army to have a lovely tattoo of their service and then your face right here. Right? This is the kind of brand loyalty we need to create. And it does happen by you being good at the service, but it also happens by getting out there, being proactive, making a difference, demonstrating, trumpeting your value, being not only acknowledged, but becoming a co-author at some point. This is what we're talking about. It's a narrative, but ultimately, a lot of librarianship for the past 100 years has been around efficiency, replaceable models, and a quiet, meek, objective nature. Those days are gone. And I'm not saying we do it because, oh, we want to be self-important. We do it because we know we're important. We have a hell of a story to tell. We would not have walked on the moon unless research librarians were there to help the rocket engineers. We would not have won World War II unless librarians were there providing information on munitions collections and intelligence development. We have set policy. All of this comes, we know cultural interactions in foreign lands. All of this, a librarian was there. That's a great story. We got to start telling it. So next time a micromanager goes, could you shelve this book for me? Yes, by the way, I rule. Right? This is okay. Tell your story. All right. Have I used up all my time? Probably. Anyway, thank you again. I really appreciate it. Good luck in your conference.